Okay, so I'm going to turn it over, guys. So first of all, thank you for participating here. I'm going to turn it over right now to Mr. Chrisberg. He's been kind enough to work with me. He knows Mr. Klemmer, and he's kind of been helped us set up this interview opportunity. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Chrisberg, who's going to introduce Mr. Klemmer, and then we'll get going here.
Hi, I'm Lou Chrisberg, and I'm not related to Paul or anything like that. I'm just a resident of the Arrowhead district, and I saw your presentation at the school board meeting, and I was very impressed with it. And I immediately thought about my friend Paul. My connection to Paul is my uncle, who I'm named after, was killed in World War II, and I never knew a whole lot about him. And in the early 2000s, I went on the 95th Infantry Division website because I knew that's the division he was in. And I left a message in one of the chat rooms if anybody knew my uncle, Staff Sergeant Louis Kadwit. And about a year or two later, I got an email from Paul here. And so since then, Paul's kind of adopted me, and he's told me all the information that I never knew about my uncle, how it happened, where it happened, and everything like that. And he's been my good friend since then. So when I saw the presentation, I thought about Paul, and I said, well, he's got to get interviewed because he's got a lot of good stuff to tell. So I'm going to get out of the way, and I'm going to bring Paul in here, and then you guys can talk to him. And by the way, I'm very proud of you guys. When I saw your presentation at the school board meeting, that made me feel like, boy, they're doing something really nice and really good, and I felt really good about that. So way to go, guys. So here comes Paul Klemmer.
Well, thank you very much for that. We appreciate it.
I use a walker, and then of course I have a secondary handicap, so I've just recently gone back to their degeneration. So
sorry, go ahead, Mr. Klemmer.
Anyway, I don't quite know what really interests your students, but
sure,
I'm very glad they are interested.
Right. Well, let me just quick have the students just introduce themselves to you.
I think I see a few pictures around the edge here.
Sure. And then we'll let them start asking questions. So maybe if our executive board members, let's see, maybe Nina, if you want to start us off, just name and grade.
Hello, my name is Nina Aschenfelter. I'm a senior this year at Arrowhead, and I'm really glad and feel special to be a part of the S.A.V.E. team. It's very nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
I'm Chloe. I'm a sophomore at Arrowhead. I'm also a part of the exec board for S.A.V.E., and I just wanted to start off by saying thank you for letting us interview you.
Thank you.
All right, and then maybe, let's see, Denali, if you wouldn't mind going next.
Hi, I'm Denali. I'm a junior, and it is great to meet you. Thank you so much for doing this.
All right, then we'll go to Jane.
Hi, I'm Jane. I'm a junior, and I just want to thank you for taking the time and for your service.
Okay. Let's go to Mina next.
Hi, I'm Mina, and I'm a sophomore, and I want to thank you for doing this.
There's your picture.
All right, we'll go to Andrew next.
Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm a senior at Arrowhead. I haven't gotten to do many interviews, but I saw you served in World War II. I'm very excited to hear what you can share with us.
All right, why don't we go to Matthew next?
Hi, I'm Matthew Weiss. I'm a junior at Arrowhead, and I'm really appreciative that we can do an interview with you today.
Hi, I'm Lainey. I'm a junior at Arrowhead, and I'm very thankful that you took your time out today to do this interview.
Hi.
All right, let's go to Jackson next.
I'm Jackson, and I'm a junior, and I just want to say, since there aren't very many World War II veterans left, I think this is going to be a really amazing interview to be able to be at.
All right, and then we'll go to Madeline.
I'm Madeline, and I'm a junior, and I'm just really grateful to have this opportunity to be in this interview.
All right. So I think how we'll do this, guys. So normally, since normally we have, so Mr. Klemmer, just a testament to you. I think this is the most amount of students we've ever had participate in a virtual interview. Usually we have about 4 or 5. So we had a lot of students who are really excited to participate. So maybe just so we don't kind of talk over each other, if you guys either want to type in the chat, just say, hey, I have a question, and then I can kind of be the moderator. Or if you guys just want to give a hand raise on your screen or hit the hand raise button, we can do that. But is there anybody who would like to start with a question for Mr. Klemmer?
May I ask you a question? Has anybody read my write-up that I gave? Because most of the things I would tell you would be in that. They have.
Yep, I read the whole write-up. I found it very interesting, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. It was great to kind of read your story, and I shared it with the students as well. So I think some of them hopefully got a chance to take a look at it a little bit. I'm not sure if they had a chance to read all of it, but thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for your interest.
Let's see, anybody who would like to start with a question, maybe Nina, Chloe, since you both are on the exec board and you've participated in a few interviews, if you'd like, one of you would like to start us off.
Sure, I can start us off. So, where were you born? And how was what was your childhood like?
I was born in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and as far as my childhood, we suffered through the Depression, which you probably heard about. Our parents had lost their jobs, and things did not look good at all until war work started and people had got jobs. So it was, my folks moved to a swampy area, filled the land with trailers behind their cars. And my father built a double garage and we moved into it. And so that's what, and we didn't, of course, have running water. We got water from Lake Bulamore and the neighbors pumped for drinking water. But then as the years went by, everything was improved. We finally drilled our own well and hit water at about 60 feet, and it's still being used today. So that.
Go ahead, Matthew.
I just wanted to ask how the Great Depression impacted you and if that like affected your personality and how you act nowadays.
Well, I was just telling that when I went to school, we went most days on a bicycle 4 miles into the city. That was high school. And the grade school was a one-room school, one teacher, 8 years. So you were pretty much limited by the ability of the teacher to handle 30 kids and do everything needed in a building. So it went from a country school to a high school, which was 4 miles away. And then in the meantime, I had picked up the paper route for the area. So I was on my bicycle, more on several bicycles. But that was the way times were. Everybody had to put in long days. I hate to tell you, but I used to sleep in the city halls. You might see people doing that. So I had.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to say, as a teacher, I've seen that a few times here and there, but I think you had a good excuse given the work you were doing during that time period to make ends meet.
And so when we weren't doing anything, my mother sent us. I have one brother. The two of us, we sent out to my grandparents' farm, and we worked on the farm. And we worked summers for farmers mainly. Got paid like $1 a day or some ridiculous price in today's dollar. But anyway, when the war effort was started, everything changed. They had a hell of a way to get started through the war. Anything of interest here more that
Anybody else? Next question.
Yeah, I have another question. So how did you get into the service? Were you drafted or something else?
Yeah, that's the way I went. I was drafted. And we had an 18-year-old draft, and people felt I was quite young, even in today's standards. 18 years were not considered ready to be on your own.
Go ahead, Jane.
When you were drafted, did you feel like you were too young, or did you feel ready to contribute?
No, I just kind of went along with the flow, whatever he said, and all my friends, of course. Some of them enlisted even before they were 18, because there was a feeling at the beginning of the war that everybody had to get in, and a nationalistic feeling. It maybe isn't felt today, but I would have felt bad if I would have flunked the exam to go in. Although going into the infantry was not a desired place. We all wanted to be pilots or something like that. Typical. I would have given anything I had good enough eyesight to be a pilot, but that never happened. I don't know if you're familiar with Oshkosh, but we had a famous pilot there, his name was Whitman. It's called Whitman Field today. And he was a friend of my parents, and we knew a fair amount about him.
Any other questions at the moment?
I have a question. Oh,
go ahead,
sorry.
Denali. And yeah, Denali, we'll have you go first, and then Maddie will have you go after.
Okay. Where did you train for the service?
Well, we were sent down initially to get our clothing and start to Fort Sheridan in Chicago. And at that time, we had written a test to qualify to go to college. The program was called ASTP, Army Specialized Training Program. And if you pass the test, you could go to some university campus and start going to college, which during time of war, you wonder why you had time for it. But I did pass the test despite being a very poor student. And we went to Fort Sheridan, and 200 of us were put on a train and sent to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania. That's near Harrisburg. And the people that trained us were the ones that had been on what they call maneuvers. They had been in the service for quite a while. And so we moved right into the barracks with these trained people, and they trained us. There was no special basic training except for the guys that had been in the service, knew what to do. That was so we stayed with the same people in a company. I don't know if you know how Army operates, but you've got a division which is about 14,000 people, and then after that there's a regiment, and then working down there's a company as kind of a core group, and we went into this company. And I spent 2 years with these same people, so we all got to know each other quite well. But the people that trained us were not specialists in training, but they showed us what to do. Of course, you would wind up being able to do a 20-mile hike with a full field pack through the mountains. This mountainous country, you go out and pick a spot in the woods and lay down and let your rest. A lot of people were thinned out because they couldn't make 20 miles. But the fat people got thin, and the thin people got better food, and they got fatter. But it was a mixture of people from all over the United States, and but there was no mixed race. In Indiantown Gap, there were a whole section of black people who were training to be stevedores, and they were probably the best people that are doing close order drill than anybody else. They really knew how to have the feeling. But we moved into the barracks with people that we spent the next couple of years with, and very few of the ASTP people ever got above PFC because the ranks were all taken up by the ones that had more training and background. So I was a PFC for a couple of years. You maybe don't know what a PFC is. I'm going to have a private first class. That's the first rank you get above private. I don't know if that helps you what you're into. I'm not sure what your interests are.
No, we really appreciate it. That's good to kind of know. I know some of the kids might be familiar with kind of some of the military terminology, whereas some of them maybe not so much. So that's really helpful. I know Madeline, you had a question.
Yeah, I know in the story it said you were a rifleman on the anti-tank company.
Yes.
And you didn't want to be that. What was like, if you could have chose something to do, what did people mainly want to be?
I wanted to be a pilot. No, the infantry is probably the lowest qualification maybe for anybody. You carry a rifle and carry a pack, but I went in, you specialize in some manner. I went into what's called anti-tank, and in there we had 57 millimeter guns mainly, but there was a group that was called the mine platoon. So our job mainly was to take care of detonating things, and we stayed pretty much away from the guns, but we did fire the bigger anti-tank guns. But the thing during the war, our anti-tank guns were relatively small for what was needed, and it was quite detrimental. Although when you fire them, you really know it. You know, they rear up on rubber wheels and about take the skin off your neck when you're firing them. But anyway, I spent my time in anti-tank, and being in that, I'm getting ahead of myself a little, but our main job then was to make sure the roads didn't have mines in them. We used mine detectors, and they're very crude electronic boxes that we carried around this mine sweeping device. And then good many times they were vacuum tube operated and they didn't work. So about half of them worked. But our main job was to secure roads before the trucks and tanks went down them. And so we got shot at plenty because we were out there first. So when the roads are open, they have to make sure there were no mines. And the Germans had mines that we were very familiar with. They were about 7 pounds or so of explosives, and they were buried, and they were found in many of the roads. We had to dig them out by hand, and most times we would go out at night, and I never, even to this day, knew how to find a way around at night, because we didn't have flashlights like you do now. Even now, I can't figure out how we were able to pull mines out of the road in the dark. But we did.
All right, Nina, I see that you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was curious too, as where you traveled while you were in service.
Well, we of course did all our training at Indiantown Gap near Harrisburg. And then we went to Port of Debarkation, Boston, and these boats took us over to Liverpool, England. We spent some time there. But the thing that was most difficult going to land, we didn't land on D-Day, we landed a month or so after that, but the method of landing was still the same, where you get on a Liberty ship and you go over the side on a net, which is our first time we ever did that. So that was exciting. We were supposed to carry a full field pack and a rifle and go over the side on this net, which seemed quite difficult. So we wound up throwing our rifles down to the landing craft, which was against the rules, but we didn't. But the method of downloading a Liberty ship, which was the most popular method of transportation. These Liberty ships were built one a day and they not too well, but they did the job. And so we had the experience of going over the side of the net, similar to what they did on D-Day.
From Normandy to where?
Well, we landed on Normandy. Omaha Beach was the popular place. So we slept in the fields, and it rained almost every day. And at that time, we had just shelter halves, more or less. You made a tent by going with somebody else, give you the other half a tent. But we were wet constantly for a month or so. So I don't know if that's the interest, but that's the route we took.
Any other questions that you guys have at the moment?
I could tell you after that and how I knew his uncle was that the front line was in about Paris when we were there, and so we used 40 and 8 boxcars. That was a boxcar named after. It would hold 40 people or 8 mules, and good many of the company moved up to the eastern part of France, and so we I don't know if people know the rivers, but the Moselle River is about like the Fox River or something. It's pretty big and very difficult to cross, and there was one crossing across the Moselle River was made by the 5th Division, and we crossed there, and we were taking artillery fire from 3 sides. It was a scary part because we knew the Germans were on 3 sides, and they were throwing shells into us constantly. But the first day, his uncle was killed. We swapped out a foxhole, and he was a shell went right into the hole and killed him immediately with a few other guys. And so that was a real eye opener. The first day we lost one of our best guys, but then after that we lost more. This happens, and when you're in the infantry, our casualties in total ran about 30%, but I never was a casualty. Just lucky. I was surprised when we were going home that wound up without getting hit. It was that common.
I'm so sorry for all that you lost or all that were injured around you. I'm obviously very thankful that you were able to avoid injury and that you're with us here today. So we really appreciate it. But I know I can only imagine the difficulties. Well, I can't imagine. I can't even think to put myself in your shoes. I know, Andrew, I saw you had your hand up. If you'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, I was wondering, when you went into these dangerous situations where anyone around you could die, did you have anything that you did or brought with you for good luck so that you didn't end up as one of them?
I wound up beginning religion. Not everybody has a religious. I didn't have that much of a religious background, but we thought about it a lot because the chances were not good in the infantry of getting hit. And of course, being in this mine platoon, we had to go out first many times. And you get shot at quite often. But they got to hit you. So, but it always really concerned us because after you have a bad day and you can figure out there's going to be another one following that, and what is your chances of surviving it? It's very trying. When we were on the attack for 3 months without relief, and I think it makes a difference how long you were subject to that. That affected people's minds, I would say. But everybody's different. Some people you would expect would not hold up under the stress really did quite well. But that was the thing that was always constantly on your mind because of the casualties you saw around you and being shot at. And under many nights, artillery was coming in. And the building you were in probably had the roof knocked off, and I usually hid in the basement. So, but it is a very trying situation. But we were on the offense, and we carried a trailer full of mines that we would put in the roads, but we never used them. All the time we pulled that trailer a load of mines around, we never had to use them. The only time that we went on a defensive is what's called the Battle of the Bulge, if you ever read up any of this stuff. That we kept moving ahead from what was called the National Line. This was a fortified line built for World War I. And we lost a lot of people trying to get through that, but then the worst one was called the S.A.V.E line. That was when we got into Germany, and they had so many pillboxes, and in one pillbox would have portholes, and they would shoot out and protecting the other one. So it was a very dangerous area to get into because these pillboxes were not even something you would see. It would be part of a building, or they were trying to hide them. And of course, when our job being the mine platoon, we built up what was called 20-pound charges on a board. And the idea would be to run with these 20 pounds of explosive on a board and the pole to put it up against the door of the pillbox. And then we made up all kinds of these charges, but I never had to do it. So I consider myself lucky. And it was very dangerous to run one of these up against the pillbox. The first thing you'd have to do is have a number of people firing on the pillbox into all the portholes. And so that was one of the more dangerous things that we got into, is blowing the door off of pillboxes in the SSGT line.
Jackson, I saw that you had your hand up. If you'd like to ask your question.
Yeah, so if you could you describe like exactly what a pillbox is and how it works?
How a pillbox works? Well, a pillbox is made so it withstands artillery direct fire. So the walls are about 8.6 or so with portholes that they can, and usually have a big steel door, and maybe steel 3 or 4 inches thick, and that would be the entrance in and out. And these were relatively small. A lot of them were connected with tunnels, so they were very difficult to break them open. But a 20-pound charge, you'd run up to the door and then pull a fuse, and they would go off, and you could normally knock the door off. But I never did it myself, so I saw it done. Well, at one time we had enough charges. We had a whole backyard full of these boards with charges fastened to them and poles that support the thing. When you run up to the pillbox, the pole would keep it braced against the door. Well, that's kind of a detail, and I just give you some idea of what my job was, more or less. The biggest thing is, in the military, you stand a lot of guard duty. So it's every 4 hours you go on guard duty for 2 hours. So you never really got a lot of rest, and we never really had anything to lay down on. We got used to sleeping on the floor of these small houses. And of course, these houses always had things we were looking for, like wine, for instance, and the farms had a place to get eggs, because we lived on rations most of the time. We didn't have a kitchen, I'd say, for the first month or two. There was no kitchen. We just buy food you get in a box. They just tiresome, you know. The biggest problem we had, as I look back now, because of some of the people that I meet, is we spent the winter more or less outside, and we had a huge amount of people that got trench foot, it's called, because the military never had thing to protect your feet except leather shoes, and these shoes became full of ice after a while, and people froze their feet, and a lot of them had to have amputated after you were out too long. But I was more fortunate. I was with the group, and we spent our times in these small houses, in these little villages, because when we were there, the townspeople all left because we normally were in range of artillery. So we put on 145 days without relief, which is a pretty trying situation. But that's the way it was.
Yeah, because I know in your memoirs you mentioned too that winter of 1944 was one of the coldest on record in Europe as well, correct?
Yeah, and we were told that, and but I would say it's kind of like our winters here, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I remember. But anyway, even today, we find people that had trench foot. My brother got it. He was in the service too, and he got trench foot. And of course, when you get gangrene, then there's not much you can do but really take your feet off.
Any other questions that you guys have next? Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
When you were overseas serving, was there anyone that you met that has an impact you on that has an impact on you even today?
I guess I didn't hear her, so maybe you could repeat it. I didn't hear. My hearing is not the greatest.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Somewhat.
Okay. My question was there anyone that you met overseas that still has an impact still has an impact on you today?
Well, not hardly anybody. You know, I'm 96, don't you? And I live in assisted living here, and I'm probably one of the oldest ones here. And so just about all of my family, the older family, are gone. I don't know if that answers your question. My brother, he's passed away, and my wife passed away in 2013, and so I'm pretty much by myself. But there are some people here that were in the war, and we have a lot to relate to. I don't know. Is that a good answer? I don't know what the question is.
Sorry, yeah, we appreciate you sharing. Yeah, and no, and I know reading in your memoir, I know you talked about some of the connections you made with your fellow servicemen after the war and kind of going to celebrations. So I know that was very interesting to read about.
Well, I think you probably heard this before. Most of us never talked about the war. Anyway, it was a subject you just didn't want to think about. And so, but then when I retired in 1994, I took it on as a kind of a project, something to do, you know, having a computer and being able to type up this stuff. But I was, I became an engineer, and I was in small companies. So I had pretty good background in engineering at the time. But the thing about it was that I sympathized with some people because I was a poor student. And you being a teacher, you understand poor students. So when I applied to go to college, the registrar told me to forget it. But, you know, that was the best thing he could have said because it was a challenge. And I got through in 4 years. And I didn't get all A's, by the way. I was a kind of B average guy.
You went to UW, right?
The University of Wisconsin, Madison. But it was a great opportunity because we used to, when we were sending garters and had a chance to talk, we were trying to think what we were going to do, and none of us really had an idea of going to college, but that was available, so we went, some of us. One of my best friends, closer to, his name was Bunkhouse. The reason he was a cowboy, he used to work on a dude ranch, and he got that name Bunkhouse. But anyway, he was from Kenosha, the same area that his uncle was, and they were fairly friendly. But only, I think in my whole company now, I can only find 2 people. But nobody in my whole platoon, they all passed away, and I've been trying to keep track of that, but it's very difficult to do. But in the company itself, one guy, the oldest one, is 100 years old. He's a medical doctor. He's delivered over 1,000 babies. Stuart, his name is. And I have another friend, or 2, but it's hard to find anybody.
Oh, Nina, you had a question? Are we ready?
Yeah. So where were you when you heard about Pearl Harbor? And how did that impact you?
We were outside, working outside when the news came. Most people remember exactly what they were doing when this news broke. And we were outside digging a ditch of some kind, and then the neighbors all came over and it was discussed. But I live in a very small neighborhood, it being just cottages along Lake Bittermore, and we all know each other pretty well. But I guess everybody can remember where they were at that time. We all got the way that things were going, we were not going to have to even go in the service. It took a little longer than some people, the optimists, were not correct.
See, Chloe, I saw that you had your hand up.
Yeah. Did you keep in contact with your family and friends throughout the war? And if so, how?
Well, we had different forms of mail. We had email. Our mail was all censored, by the way, and that was difficult for me when I tried to write this up, because I have read some 150 letters my mother had saved that I sent home, but everything was so, we didn't ever want to worry the parents, so we never told them anything bad. So I was told how great everything was, a beautiful country. It was far from the truth. That was pretty standard. Of course, our parents, they worried sick about us, especially when they read the newspapers. So it was hard on them. My brother, I think he landed on D-Day, but he was right over there. He was a radio man. He used to work on a kind of a telegraph or Morse code system. So anyway, it was just the two of us. So we met over there, and he was a sergeant. He had a chance to get around a little better than I did. But it was the funniest thing about it, we never really, since we had similar experiences, we never even, after the war, talked about them to each other, which I wish we would have in some ways. Because he was involved with the crossing of the river, which was very difficult. The Moselle River was crossed with bridges, pontoon boat, Bailey bridges they were called. And pontoons, they were blown off. And he got across the river, but had to go into hiding because the bridges were blown. He had a terrible time. But, you know, I find out a lot about it because he wouldn't talk about it. So anyway, there's a lot of stories. What I've written is only part of things, because documentation after 60 years or so is a little hard to come by.
Just out of curiosity, speaking of your writing, how long did it take you to compile your memoir? I'm just out of curiosity.
Oh, just a couple of years or so. It wasn't too bad, but it's just finding people.
Sure.
And the remarkable thing is, you think you created these great friendships, but when you left the service, we never contacted each other. We just didn't. And we didn't talk about the war either. And so then 50 years later, I tried to do this. And so I had a few clues how to find people. And I tried to put these stories together, but it's far from being complete. So anyway, I had these letters, which were not too much help, but then I got a hold of people, and remarkable thing is some of the daughters of the guys that I had were quite interested, maybe like you guys today.
Any other questions you guys have at the moment? Yeah, go ahead, Jackson.
So I saw that you went into engineering after you left the service. Could you tell us a little more about what your career was like?
You mean about getting into engineering?
Yeah.
Well, of course, my first year I was a little scared of doing this. I went to teachers college called pre-professional. And then the next thing is to move on to Madison, the university. And that was probably the hardest. They had to do a slide rule and all kinds of books. I didn't even know how to use a slide rule. I learned by doing. The one thing you catch on to is you're on your own.
You probably don't know what a slide rule is.
Do you know what a slide rule is? You know what logarithms are? You know what a logarithm is? It's a kind of a distance. I always looked at it. You could add by you could multiply by adding, and that's what a slide rule does. You move the slide, and it moves a logarithmic scale. And
slide rules were calculators before there were calculators.
we always walked around with one strapped to our side like a gun, you know. But anyway, that was a great experience. I lived in the dormitory there at Madison, and that was a great experience too. I enjoyed living in the dormitory. But we were pretty much all veterans at that time. Although there were women around at the other dormitories, and so we always had pretty good parties. But Madison has a record. I don't know if you guys ever went to Madison, but they have a record of probably the top beer drinking in the school.
It's still true.
It's still true. I tried to uphold the tradition. But living in the dorms, that was quite a great experience. I had one daughter graduated, and she lived in the dorms too, in music. I have one daughter that's a nurse. She graduated in Florida. And then I have one handicapped daughter. I got 3 daughters. I have been well taken care of. Anyway, I can't say enough about Madison and the way I was treated, because I was just coming from nowhere. I had very poor high school record, and grade school, of course, it was poor. But then I took night courses so I could get up to speed on mathematics. So those courses were really very helpful. Anyway.
Yeah, go ahead, Lainey. I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering, when you were in college, what kind of things did you do in your free time?
Drank beer, I suppose.
Not much different.
Things I haven't seen. Well, I don't think we even had a lot of spare time. I don't know if you know much about engineering, but they take up your time. You got like night labs, and you're constantly behind the ball trying to keep up to the next test somebody could dream up for you. No, I didn't think it was. I think I did fairly well for my background, but anyway, it's not an easy course.
Go ahead, Jane.
You mentioned that during the war you sometimes had to just stand guard for like hours at a time. Were there certain things that you did to like help that time pass quicker or just not let yourself become overcome with stress or anxiety?
Well, most times there was two of you, two people. And most nights for me, being in infantry, was 2 hours on and 4 hours off that went through the night. And you, so with two people, you just could talk, but it was it is terribly boring. And you get cold. You stand outside half the time.
You want it to stay boring, right?
Yeah. But when I kind of an unfortunate circumstance, I didn't have enough points, they called it, to get out of the service. So I was sent from Camp Shelby, Mississippi, where it was hotter in hell in the summer. In the wintertime, they sent me to Missoula, Montana as a guard in their prison. So I never got done with guard duty. I worked full-time guard duty there. And this prison was set up during the war for professional criminals. They were people that had been in trouble all their lives, most of them that were in this prison because they couldn't stay out of the trouble. Civilian life or military. So that, and more guard duty. We had about 1,500 prisoners, and I used to work on the gate. But anyway, it was a beautiful city, Missoula, Montana.
I guess a question that I had, so during your time in Europe, was there any place that you remember that stood out as most memorable to you based on kind of the people there, the surroundings, or just the overall experience?
I don't know, when the first experience was in Harrisburg, it was pretty lonely there. And I can't think of anything really liked as far as any places. You got me there. I guess I wasn't too excited about where I'd been.
That's okay. I can certainly understand, given all that you were dealing with. Another question that I had too was, so I teach U.S. history. I'll be teaching a unit on World War II in the next couple weeks.
Oh, really?
I guess if from your experience of someone who served in World War II, one piece of advice or two things that a couple things that you think like this generation of students should know about World War II from your experience.
Well, it's all history. That's 75 years ago, and you'll find out though, if you're going to go into a war, you have to acquire territory, and it takes the infantry to do it. You have never really done anything until you occupied the land. And of course, you see what's going on today over in Russia area. It's 100,000 people, and the reason you need all them is because you've not done anything in a war until you've occupied the land, and that takes a lot of hand-to-hand stuff. That's my opinion, anyway. And then so we're in never-ending wars. We're on the edge of one right now in Russia. But it takes you back to even World War I and all the different ones. It's that you haven't done anything until you've taken over the area with actual guys holding a rifle.
Well, thank you for sharing that. No, that's
just an opinion, you know.
Yeah, no, that's really insightful. I think in my opinion too, I think that aspect of it definitely gets overlooked when people talk about conflict, of the importance of, the men on the ground who, you're right, have to occupy.
On the ground that sets where you are. how
Mhm.
far you've gone. You know, we went through the National line and the Siegfried line, and then there was the Battle of the Bulge, but it all has to do with territory. You got to take it, and it takes a lot of sacrifice to send people out there get shot at. It's terribly hard on your nerves. But I don't know if anybody would gather that, but it just kind of wears on you after a while.
So we're probably going to close to the point that we'll wrap up here, because and we really appreciate your time, but we don't want to take too much more of it. Are there any couple last questions that you guys have, or anybody who something that you were wondering from Mr. Klemmer you didn't get a chance to ask, or would like to still ask? Nope, not so much. Mr. Klemmer, anything else that you'd like to kind of share with us about your experience?
Well, the only thing, even from the start, I didn't think that there would be people showing interest in this type of thing, and I'm thankful that they show interest, because we're never ending war situations, and hopefully people use their head when they get into this, and it's the students that have to have a serious feeling about what it's like to be in one, and not but the individual so much, but the whole country and what they have to put into it. And infantry is not the place I would have chosen to be, but until you take the area, the countryside, you haven't done anything really, it seems to me. So it's going to be ongoing, I would guess. See pictures on TV now. I mean, that's all you see, a bunch of guys running around with guns, and there's 100,000 of them. So things haven't changed much.
One thing I'll add real quick. The hat I'm wearing, I don't know if you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the insignia for the 95th Infantry Division that Paul and my uncle served in. And on the back is what they were nicknamed, the Iron Men of Metz, because they took the city of Metz in eastern France. And that name was given to them by one of the German generals defending Metz at the time. He called them Iron Men. So that was part of the legacy of where Paul served and the division he served in. And this hat that I have, Paul gave me. So it's a really nice memento that I keep.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's really interesting to hear, and just speaks to the record of the 95th. And obviously, Mr. Klemmer, thank you so much for your service. I know it's every time I come across a veteran, I know that's those are just words, and there's more that we obviously can do to show our appreciation, but just a simple thank you, for your service, and B, for taking your time to share your story with us today. I know I really appreciate it, and my students, our S.A.V.E. members, I'll open it up to you guys for a minute if you guys would like to thank Mr. Klemmer or just have some parting words.
Thank you so much for this. This was really interesting. I really appreciate your time.
Well, I'm not a professional speaker, as you could tell, but I think I know the subject.
Go ahead, Sarah. I think I saw you were unmuting yourself.
Thank you so much for your service. It means so much, and thank you so much for answering our questions. It's so interesting hearing about, especially this time period in your service that you did.
Well, thank you for your interest.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for your service. And I know even though that the role that you had in the war wasn't what you had intended, it's really inspiring how you took it on and really ran with it.
I'm glad you're interested.
I want to say thank you both for your time and for your service. Like Mr. Miller was saying, it's just a thank you, but I hope it means something. And it was really great to hear about all your stories and experiences.
Yeah, well, there's a few. I so much has been forgotten through the years. But at least I wrote it, some of it down.
Yeah, I would like to thank you as well for your time today and obviously your service. And it was really great hearing your story, and it's nice to be able to savor these moments that we have.
Well, thank you for your interest.
Thank you for your service, Mr. Klemmer, and I really appreciate that you took time out of your day to answer all our questions.
I'm retired. Didn't take long to get into that habit. Retired.
Well, once again, we really appreciate it. And I mean, this is, one thing I would tell you is through advising S.A.V.E., I've been incredibly impressed with how interested our youth is in learning about the experiences of veterans like yourself. So there is definitely, there are a lot of people out there who want to hear stories like yours and other experiences, whether it be in Korea, Vietnam, or more recent conflicts. So there's definitely a thirst for knowledge out there, which as a teacher inspires me, and I'm glad to hear that your story and the stories of our other veterans are being told, because they definitely need to be. So thank you once again. And Mr. Chrisberg, thank you so much for coordinating this all. Really appreciate it.
My privilege and my honor, and I'm very proud of your club. Great job, and I'm very happy that you guys were able to do this.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, I suppose we'll, sorry, go on, Mr. Klemmer, something you want to say?
No, there's a lot you could say, but I think we should limit our time somewhat.
Right.
Like I appreciate all the extra time and effort you put in to your job too. Teaching is not the easiest thing. I know my grandson, he's a band director in a small high school, and I know he puts an awful lot in it because he likes to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I really appreciate that as well. So, well, thank you again. And on that note, I guess we'll conclude, and you have a great rest of your day, and hopefully the winter is treating you okay at this point. I know it's chilly again real fast. So
we
take
like
care.
to get outside a little bit, but it's kind of miserable.
Right. All right. Well, take care. Bye.
Bye.
These mist-covered mountains are a home now for me, but my home is the lowlands, and always will be. Someday you'll return to your valleys and your farms, and you'll no longer burn to be brothers in arms. Through these fields of destruction, baptisms of fire, I've witnessed your suffering as the battle reached high, and though it had hurt me so bad, in the fear and alarm, you did not desert me. so many different worlds, so many different suns, and we have just one world, but we live in different ones. Now the sun's gone to hell, the moon's riding high. Let me bid you farewell. Every man has to die, but it's written in the stars. In every line in your palm, we're fools to